And of course, there is a hadith, and because if you read the seerah, there's a hadith of Abd al-Muttalib, the granddad of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he basically had this dream, because they didn't know this well was there. That he had this dream, and this dream was that go and say this, and then the word Zamzam was in the dream, and then he went and dug the thing because the dream was there, and then he kind of re-excavated it, or whatever you want to say. And this is one of the things I was looking at, the veracity of the hadith, and it's authentic. This hadith is authentic according to Ibrahim Ali. أخرجه ابن إسحاق بسنده فقال حدثنا blah 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 blah. He says it's mentioned in the book because we are trying to maintain the integrity of and authenticity of hadiths when we're going, because a lot of these hadiths are not actually you'd be surprised when going through the seerah, so many of them are not actually authentic. So, and we already discussed the desalinization plants, mixing water, monetary arguments, although the water is free actually. I mean, some say they're doing this so Saudi Arabia can get money. I don't know why Saudi Arabia were trying to make money but give it for free. Maybe they should have put some money, because people would buy this thing. I mean, they could, but they don't. To be fair, and this is something which people can say whatever, but that Paran is not Arabia, but we've already discussed all the references with that. There's no connection between Prophet Muhammad and Ismail, which there is, because in the Bible itself it says that Ismail is from the son of Kedar, and it locates him at Arabia and all these kind of things. So even from a biblical perspective, they know that Ismail is an Arab. They know that. The biblical scholars know that he was. And sons of Kedar and all that kind of stuff is mentioned in the book of Genesis. So khalas, it's done. Yani. Obviously, they try and mock him. If you look at the Old Testament, the kind of depictions of him as mockery and stuff like that, because of the tribal allegiance they have to their own tribe. Yeah.
I had a quick question. So Ismail is Arab. Does that make Ibrahim alayhi salam? What does that make him?
He wasn't Arab, because the thing is, the Arabic language, really, the formation of the Arabic language, most linguists will say the following. Most linguists will say that there is something called a Proto-Semitic language. In Arabic, it's called al-lugha as-simawiyya al-umm. Yeah, so these are all of the, like Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic, all of these kind of languages, they go back to one common ancestor, effectively. This is what they say. And this common ancestor is not available to us now. And we don't know what the languages look like. But obviously we'll talk about this actually, because it's in the slides, but Abraham was situated in Mesopotamia. Yeah. So the current day, like Iraq, the cradle of the earth, and so, whatever. But at that time, there wasn't Arabic that was being spoken. I mean, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the point is no, he couldn't be said to be Arab at all, in fact. And the Quran says, فيه آيات بينات مقام إبراهيم ومن دخله كان آمنا فيه آيات بينات. So what are the ayat bayinat? When you go into this place, some of the scholars say min al-ayat, or from the ayat and evidences and signs, is Zamzam, actually. Because you have the Mash'ar al-Haram, you have this, you have that, but you have the Kaaba itself. These are all ayat. These are all evidences. But the Zamzam is a sign. It's the well of Zamzam is an evidence. Binas al-Quran. In fact, the Quran is telling you this. And the Quran is telling you explore this argument. And we said before that you'll find the best arguments in the Quran itself. So the Quran is directing us effectively to that area and telling you to explore the area, because when you explore that area and the geography of it, the geology of it, the history of it, you'll start seeing all these arguments. And but then the question is, I mean, obviously we spoke about the historicity of David, we spoke about the historicity of Solomon, if you remember. Do you remember that? Remember we spoke about the historicity of David? Does anyone remember the kind of the stele that changed the game in terms of that?
Yeah, the tablet.
Yeah, what's the name of that tablet or stele? The Tel Dan stele, right?
Oh, Tel Dan, yeah.
Tell us more. What did it do? We said
You mentioned.
There was one language. No, this is different. This is that you're probably thinking about the Rosetta Stone or something.
It mentioned the House of David.
Yes,
in the tablet.
House of David and stuff, and that's where people change their minds. Even Israel Finkelstein, we said that there's two schools of thought: the minimalist and the maximalist in secular academics and stuff like that. And the minimalists, they had a very staunch view when it comes to these kind of things. And then when that stele came to light, they changed their mind, because it was actually, how could this be? It's inexplicable. Why is David there? And it's dated. Actually, we'll come to the date in a second. But actually, when it comes to Abraham, though there isn't any direct evidence of his existence. I mean, there isn't, because it's so far away. We're talking about 3.5 to 4,000 years. And I'll tell you how I came to that formulation here. About 3.5, we're talking about when did Abraham exist. If we're talking, Jesus existed, for the sake of argument, they say he died, but we say he disappeared. Let's say, Allah. But رفعه الله إليه. When? Was about 35 AD. AD. So we're talking about good 2,000 years ago. Effectively 2,000 years ago. Jesus about 2,000 years ago. 1,190 years. Something like that, yeah? That's Jesus. Moses is, I don't know, add another 1,000 years to that or something. And we'll come to exactly the dates. I've got them written down. But he's at the time of, let's say, Ramses II, they say, right? And then Abraham, we're talking about 3,500 to 4,000 years. A very long time ago. Very, very long. So when we're talking about an individual figure, 4,000 years ago, you try and find proof of his existence and a rich literary tradition and stuff like that, you're not going to find it. So it's too obscure. Unless we're talking about king. And even some of the kings of Mesopotamia and the old Babylonian kingdom, they're not mentioned. We don't even know some of the kings even. So that's why you're not going to find that much evidence. But then obviously, as we know with the Tel dynasty, if someone says that we don't have evidence of existence, therefore it doesn't exist, it's a fallacy called the argument from silence. It's a known historical fallacy called the argument from silence, just because it goes back to the lack of evidence, or the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. For a very long time, people didn't know that Neptune existed. It doesn't mean, okay, therefore Neptune doesn't exist. It just doesn't mean you can see it. So we know with the Tel dynasty that these arguments from silence are very problematic for historians, especially ancient historians, because something can unearth, just like the Tel dynasty unearthed, and then people change their minds. So why have a strong view on it? So yeah, this is the timeline here. Look, Abraham, the old Babylonian Empire was around this time, so it's 1894 to 1594. Most biblical scholars, for the sake of argument, date him back to the old Babylonian Empire. So if we're saying 1894, that's about 2,000, that's 4,000 years ago, effectively, like 3,100 years, something like that, you know. Ramses II is 1303 to 1213. So you can see there's about 600 years between them, you know, give or take 300 to 600 years, something like that, yeah.
Do they have, because we know Prophet Abraham was he was in the time of Namrud. Do we have any archaeological evidence of Namrud?
No, a good question. Nimrud himself as a king, they don't have any, in fact, they are very skeptical of his existence, the secular academics. But some of them have said it could be this king, it could be that king, and so it's not conclusive. But Nimrud himself, the name doesn't appear in the king lists. That's what they would say at the moment. That's what I was just saying. Some of the kings don't actually, the king lists are not decisive.
That could be like a Pharaoh title, Namrud.
Could be a title, yes.
Yeah, because Pharaoh is the Ramses Thani, the Pharaoh, series of
it could
Pharaoh. Namrud could be another one named in their
it could be.
sources.
Yeah, it could be, for sure. But if you're talking specifically about that name, David, as we said, the Tel dynasty, so we're talking 870, 750. So as you can see there's a good 300-400 years between them, more than that actually. Do the math. I don't know what the math is. And then once again, like 700 years from Jesus to from David to Jesus, as you can see. And then look, 600 years from Jesus to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's not, it's not like we're saying that these are the only prophets. Of course, we believe there's a tradition that says 124,000 prophets. But when you talk about ulul azmi min al-rusul, obviously David isn't min ulul azm, but some of the big names in the Quran, you can see there's a serious distance between them, like 300 to 400, 500 years, 300 to 400, 500 years. Then the major protagonist starts to come out. Moses comes out, Jesus comes out, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes out, Abraham was there. Do you know what I mean? That's 300, 400 years between them. And you can start seeing there's a narrative here which is starting to make historical sense. Every 300 to 400 years, 400 to 500, 300 to 500 years, whatever it may be, around that time you're starting to see a new, very important prophet being mentioned or shown in the historical timeline. So you see, archaeologically, okay, as we said with Abraham, Andrea Seri, she actually says, what's one of the reasons why she's a historian of this period, of old Babylonian period, yeah? What's the reason why we couldn't retrieve so much archaeological evidence for that time? She goes because there's a high water table. So a lot of the archaeological things are not actually found. You know what I mean? So, and you'll find actually that a lot of the stuff in terms of the ancient cities and stuff were really discovered 100 years ago, 50, 80 years ago, 90 years ago, and so on. Like a lot of the discoveries have been very, very recent. But this is what Britannica says about Abraham. Okay, so I'm just going to copy and paste from literally a secondary source material. It says that there can be no biography of Abraham in the ordinary sense. The most that can be done is to apply interpretation of modern historical finds to biblical materials so as to arrive at the probable judgment as to the background and patterns of events in his life. Okay, and then it continues. Thus, there are two main sources for reconstructing the figure of Father Abraham. The book of Genesis, from the genealogy of Terah, Abraham's father, and his departure from Ur to Haran in chapter 11, to the death of Abraham in chapter 25. And recent archaeological discoveries and interpretations concerning the area and era in which biblical narrative takes place. And then it continues. It says, most scholars agree that Ur Qasdim was the Sumerian city of Ur, today Tul, it's basically Al-Mughayr, yeah? Al-Mughir or Al-Mughayr. It's in Iraq, that's what I'm asking you. I don't know. About 200 miles southeast of Baghdad in Lower Mesopotamia, which was excavated from 1922 to 1934. That's what I said, about 100 years ago. Imagine, 100 years ago we didn't have this information because there was no excavation. Now we have it. It is certain that the cradle of the ancestors was the seat of vigorous polytheism, whose memory had not been lost, and whose uncontested master in Ur was Nana or Sin, the Sumerio-Akkadian moon god. They served other gods. Joshua, Moses' successor, recalls speaking to their descendants at Shechem. Okay. Now, really, this is the reason I want to bring this to your attention. There is, although there isn't any direct, let's say, specific archaeological discoveries of Abraham, there is something else we can do with this to create an argument. And the best person I've seen that has made an argument, he's put a video and it's, I think, got over 1 million views now. And he's actually produced many of the books that we use here as well. His name is Abu Zakaria. I'm not sure if you've come across him. Abu Zakaria. He's got a website called Many Prophets One Message. Many Prophets One Message. And he's written the book on prophecies, the forbidden prophecies. And he's also written the Eternal Challenge. You might have come across him. But he makes a very interesting argument relating to Abraham, and I wanted to bring it to your attention. He says, look, archaeologically, if you think about it, when this guy, Sir Leonard, I don't know what his surname is, but I'll come to it in a second. I think his name is Sir Leonard. Second, let me get his name.
Sir Leonard Woolley.
Yeah, where'd you get that? What slide number?
Doesn't say the number. After that picture on the tablet.
Oh, yes, Woolley. Yes, Sir Leonard Woolley. Yeah. So Sir Leonard Woolley, from 1922 to 1934, when he excavated the region, yeah, and they found the city of Ur and all those kind of things, they started to understand things they never understood before. Okay, fine. So recent archaeological finds have led us to a certain place now, yeah? Okay. What do we find? We find more information about not only Old Babylonian, because there's a difference between the Old Babylonian kingdoms and what they called Neo-Babylonian kingdoms. And there's not much that separates them in terms of, when the old one ends, obviously the new one begins, okay? But the question is, what were they worshipping? And what you'll find is that they were worshipping a multiplicity of gods. Yes. But they had this thing called the Astral triad. And this is, Abu Zakaria makes the point that actually, look, if you think about it, you've got the Astral triad, which consists of what? The sun, the moon, and Venus. The sun, the moon, and Venus. Now, why is this significant for us? Because if you read the Quran, you'll find that Abraham is speaking to his people. فَلَمَّا رَأَى الشَّمْسَ بَازِغَةً قَالَ هَذَا رَبِّي هَذَا. This whole discourse is happening with Abraham and his people. And he says, I looked at the stars. The word kawkab could mean star, could also mean planet. He said, هَذَا رَبِّي. This is my Lord. فَلَمَّا أَفَلَ. When it disappeared, he said, I don't like those that disappear. When he saw the moon, he said, هَذَا رَبِّي. He said, this is my Lord. And then when it disappeared, he said, I don't like those that disappear. And then when he saw the Shams, the sun, he says, هَذَا رَبِّي هَذَا أَكْبَر. this is my Lord, this is the big one, or this is even bigger, or even greater, bigger, yeah, or greater. And then فَلَمَّا أَفَلَتْ, he said that when it disappeared, he said that if God doesn't guide me, then I'll be of the astray people. So you can see that Abraham in the Quran he's mentioning 3 celestial spheres or bodies. He's mentioning the sun, he's mentioning the moon, and he's mentioning the kawkab, which could either mean star or could either mean planet. This information is not in the Bible. Now that is interesting, isn't it? Because we said that recent archaeological discoveries, Abu Zakariya makes a point, he said, look, recent archaeological discoveries have showed us that in particular, yes, they used to worship the earth and the skies and all that kind of, but there was a specific significance for what you call the Astral triad. And how do we know that these 3 things in particular had specific significance? For example, through what you call the kuduras. It's a bit like stellas. It's just like these kind of stones and stuff like that, which have information on them. And you can see, like, I'm giving you one example, but he gives like 3 or 4 examples himself. The Kuduru of Nebuchadnezzar. That's how you say his name, right? And Nebuchadnezzar. And you'll see the dating is afterwards, but it's to show, and Abu Zakariya makes the point that in fact you'll find this astral triad throughout the entire area, the north, the east, the south. So this was like one of the main ways they used to worship. The sun, the moon, and Venus. These are the 3 things they used to worship. Now the Quran talks about Shams, Qamar, Kawkab. Literally, sun, moon, but this was not in the Bible. So where did this information come from? It's a very interesting and powerful argument. It's not in the Bible.